Welcome to the post-election edition of This Week in Missouri Politics. So big, we're going to do 3 segments today. Starting with Jeff Mazur, the best Twitter account online with Launch Code. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.
First time on the show, many invitations, filing acceptance. Former Senator Jeff Smith, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Mary Elizabeth Coleman, been on a couple times, flipped the seat. Congratulations on your win.
Thanks so much.
And David Barklage, are you the dean or the chairman of the board or what of the Missouri Republican Party?
I don't know what I am today.
You've elected more Republicans than I know, so let's just talk about what happened. When you were toiling away at one time working in a minority, trying to get Republicans elected, did you ever think that it would just become automatic and it would be this dominant in the state?
No, and in fact, I think what this election showed us is it is going to be very hard. I've always thought Missouri was a purple state. I think it has become solidly red now. You had counties hit 80%, high 70s all over. You had Sandra McDowell anywhere that the current auditor did not advertise. McDowell was running up huge margins. And those rural margins, those aren't going to be impacted in 2020 by Trump. Obviously, Trump pushed the vote the other way.
Ask you a question. Is this a reddish state, but when Donald Trump's around, it is just a Trump state?
You know, I think it is. Look at the transition of Jefferson County, for example. That has gone solidly from Dem to red, and we're in a transition. I think your ex-labor, your old labor, and even a lot of your trades labor right now are moving in the direction of the Republican Party being pressured on trade and other issues. And I think that sort of lasts your South County, your North County, your Jefferson County, your Collier County, same thing in Kansas City area. When those fall, it's complete. We will be a solid red state. It doesn't mean, like Kansas, you can't elect Democrats. It just means it's much, much harder.
Jeff Mazur, I mean, I know, like, if you're in the newsroom at the Post-Dispatch, they hate Trump, but everywhere west of there loves the guy. I'm just not sure that we're not a reddish state where Donald Trump just owns it.
Sure. I think if you look at the demographic changes and shifts in the state over the last 10 years, that tells you the story of why we are where we are today and why Democrats are where they are. If you look at the shift in age of the population of the state, 10 years ago, 18% of people were over 60. Today, 24% of people in the state are over 60. That's a demographic that does well, that Republicans does well with. If you look at educational attainment, you see that we're about 10 percentage points behind educational attainment, college degree attainment of the rest of the country. Non-college voters are people who Republicans do very well with. And then if you look at the racial demographics of the state, you'll see that while most of the country is becoming less white, Missouri is staying about the same in terms of white versus non-white voters. Obviously, Republicans do very well with white voters, not very well with non-white voters. And so
smart
those
people is what you're saying is we do well with.
Demographics can be destiny in some instances, and I think the state looks like it does today in large part because of those demographic realities.
Jeff Smith, though, is there not an argument that Democrats at the national level, I felt like every time Claire McCaskill would get a little momentum, because she knows this state. She knows how to campaign in this state. Every time she get a little momentum, somebody in Washington do something insane and just push her back a little more.
Yeah, I mean, she had to be pretty disappointed when Hillary Clinton popped up a few weeks before the election and said, hey, you know what? I might run again in 2020. I mean, if there's anything that Claire McCaskill didn't want to hear at that moment, it was Hillary Clinton coming back onto the national stage. And as you said, there were a few moments like that. And sadly, for Missouri Democrats, there aren't a lot of great national surrogates that we can bring in right now.
There's Joe Biden.
There's Joe
Biden.
There's Joe Biden, and there weren't a lot of other people. And so, you know, that was certainly helpful, I think, for Josh Hawley to be able to bring in Trump, be able to bring in Pence, energize different parts of the state.
Why didn't you take Beyonce to Bollinger County?
Ha.
Mary Elizabeth Coleman, you were out on the doorstep knocking on doors. You actually had to go convince people that had voted for a Democrat to then switch and vote Republican. What was outside of your political ability? What was the headwinds that made that easier to do all over Jefferson County?
Yeah, so I want to kind of take point with our fellow panelists. Basically, what I heard is what I'm hearing in the national media, that white, uneducated old people vote for Republicans. And I don't think that's what we saw. We saw a big coalition across the state as the National Party continues to move further and further in the left, and the progressives are taking over the Democratic Party. We're seeing those moderates swing over to the Republican side. And that's the reaction I saw. My district is really 50-50 district. It's pro-labor, socially conservative. And I think that the message is resonating. They love Donald Trump. And I think that was really the reaction that we saw.
So I think that's what you see among moderates in Jefferson County. Among a lot of moderates in St. Louis County, you see a different type of shift.
That's right. Jean Evans were sitting here. She'd say something different.
Yeah, more kind of suburban, affluent moderate.
That's right.
When I was knocking on doors, I encountered a lot of women in particular who said, "I've never voted for a Democrat in my life. This year, I'm voting straight ticket."
Yeah, but on the other hand, we were counting MAGA hats at the polls, and so it wasn't just the men that were wearing them.
David Barklage, to get 80% for a Republican in St. Clair County, does that mean they're going to have to write off St. Louis County?
I think that St. Louis County is actually not going to go the way people think. I think there's going to be real pressure in South County, and Northwest County is going to move decidedly more Republican. You saw Jim Murphy's seat, that pick up, and some of those were running closer in some of those labor seats. The other thing that was interesting is you can't get over 60% on minimum wage or on marijuana unless there were Trump or Republican voters voting for that. And so that's an interesting dynamic for those young white males. Who were those voters that were voting for Hawley, who support Trump, who support minimum wage, who support marijuana? That's an interesting dynamic that we'll be measuring. But I'll just say one last thing. This election cycle was unique. The first time that I have seen in history, and I believe in history, that you had two waves. You normally have intensity of one party at the expense of another party. This election, we saw both parties having intensity. Yep. We've never seen that before. Nothing like that.
It just looks to me like that you have a group of people in Washington that do not like white, straight, or heterosexual males. They just don't like them. And if you're Christian, that's like the quadfecta of doom. And I don't know how would you tell a person to run for state senate if the National Party is going to say that the base of your constituency in a district like the 3rd, that the base of that constituency is the problem with the world?
Well, I don't think anyone's saying that the Republican Party base is the problem of the world. I think Hillary made an ill-advised comment during the campaign, but here's what I think the broader story is in Missouri. Missouri Republicans were very smart over the last couple decades, and they put forth some policies which I think have fundamentally shaped the demographics of the state that Jeff talked about. Yeah. When the stem cell initiative in 2006, that told a lot of scientific researchers, hey, you know what, maybe Missouri's not the best place for us. The constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage told a lot of, that message to LGBT voters, you know what, maybe Missouri isn't going to be the most hospitable place. Same with the constitutional amendment to make English the official language of the state. That said, hey, we're probably not going to be the most friendly state to new immigrants. And so that is one of the reasons for the shifts that Jeff Mazur described a few minutes ago, and that's been incredibly challenging for our party to get a statewide majority in the wake of those shifts.
And I think that's true that the Democratic Party in Missouri has a brand problem. It has a marketing problem because, like David said, you have these issues that have been core premises of the Democratic coalition for a long time: raise the minimum wage, protect labor rights, do ethics reform in Jefferson City. All of these things passed overwhelmingly on the ballot at one point or the other in 2018. But you don't see that translating to victories for the candidates who campaign on those things. So I think there is a negative factor that's attached to the Democratic Party brand, and that has that impact that we've seen.
David Barklage, going forward, what if a Joe Biden steps up and goes to the debate, right? And the moderator asks some, insulting question to Donald Trump and his supporters, and Joe Biden says, wait a minute, Donald Trump's doing the best he can. He means well. His supporters are good people making the best decisions. You should stop. What if he triangulates the media and Trump? I mean, they've got to do something, I think, in Missouri to save Democrats from the media.
Yeah, I mean, this was a Democrat wave year up to about 2 weeks before the election. Kavanaugh is where it started.
Right, the Kavanaugh thing.
Kavanaugh started it, but in the last 2 weeks, it was just, and even last weekend, it was an amazing shift in places.
Democrat wave here in Missouri, but you see 37 House House seats in the U.S. House.
But
those Senate seats in a very bad map for Democrats. Yeah. Republicans are going to wind up picking up in the end of this thing 2 Senate seats and the U.S. Senate.
But it was really contained to suburbia, and my point is, it should have. I think it could have gone into a lot farther, and so there was definitely a kind of wave. But I think this is that clearly what you articulate is correct, because I think the press handed Donald Trump the nomination, the election, and candidly, they are doing more good for him than harm by the sort of their overzealous play of things. And I think actually they're highlighting the more socialist or very progressive wing of the Democrats, and going after Trump, end up bringing out a Republican wave that that wasn't there. And again, we're going to have the problem with polling of undercounting Trump voters because there are people that don't like what he says, don't want to pound on their chest necessarily, but they're voting for him because they like what their perception is he's making changes they like, and they're going to be with him. I think labor is a classic example where it's very divided.
Mike Jones and I had this conversation on the radio this week. I actually think that Donald Trump may do better with the African-American community than any Republican has in a long time because he is aggressive. And there's a stylistic thing that, you know, a poor white guy that grew up in a trailer in West Butler County and a person like Bruce Franks, we have something in common. And I think Donald Trump may have a way he bridges that gap. Does he get 50? No, but he get 12. He can get that percentage of the black vote, which debilitates, I think, a lot of Democratic candidates, especially in a state like Missouri.
Well, if he gets more than 15% of the black vote in his reelection, I will crawl down to West Butler County.
You know, we take this.
Okay, and I'll cook you some grits.
He should really come out strongly in favor of enhanced voter rights and protections for African-American voters if he's counting on so much support.
I don't think he means it that much, he's Donald Trump. But you put some cheese in them, I'll eat those grits. Mary Elizabeth Coleman, you kept a supermajority. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Nobody could have predicted that you could have ever kept every seat. 116 Republicans, 24 in the Senate. Now you have all these Republicans. Does this become? You've actually had to go flip a seat. Now you got to defend it. It changes a little bit of the dynamic. But in 2020, normally you'd see a better Democrat year if Trump runs. And Jeff, I'm not sure if that's true.
Well, I think that the fundraising advantage that we saw at the national level and the flip seats at the House are going to help provide a platform for Trump to continue to make his argument in 2020. And I think that's going to help in the states as well. So I don't know that internal conflict. I haven't been in the building yet. Ask me that question in 2 months and I'll see. But at this point, it seems like a really cohesive leadership team. The elections for leadership the day after went very well. We have a strong team in place, and a lot of people are excited to do the
Well, to bring a Victor Callahan quote up, your enemy isn't the Democrats. You're in the House. The enemy is the Senate. You guys got to stick around.
Jeff.
Yeah, you guys got to stick around. We're going to have bring on Steve Roberts, the new chairman of the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus. We'll bring the panel back for the last segment, talk about what happens next. But in the meantime, go to showmemissouri.com. Went to DeKalb County this week. Me and Commissioner McPhee and a few folks sat around and talked about the history of DeKalb County. I think you'll enjoy it. Show Me Missouri the way it's supposed to be said with an AH.com. We'll be right back after this.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Looking to get quality insurance at a price you can afford? Now you can, thanks to CFM Insurance. Select from our broad range of farm, home, and rental property coverage. Find an agent right in your local area, as CFM is represented by a network of 200 independent agencies throughout Missouri. For personal and dependable service from a company with a history of insuring the families of Missouri that dates back to 1869, visit WeInsureMissouri.com and find an agent near you today.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics, Segment 2. We have on a rising star in the Democratic Party, Stephen Roberts. You are the chair of the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus. Congratulations on your win. Welcome back to the show.
Honored to be here, as always.
Let's just start in. There's people that watch this show that probably know what the Black Caucus is. Tell us what it is and why it matters.
Absolutely. So the important thing about the Black Caucus is we're focused on issues facing the African-American community, and we're especially relevant now. I mean, we make up half the Democratic caucus.
So when we talk about these issues, looking into session, I know you've just won this honor this week in this leadership role.
Thank you.
But I'm sure when you were planning on it, you had some things you wanted to touch on. What are some things, not just that you want, that are goals, what are some practical things you can reach out on and impact some policy in the legislature? Because I think you see a generation of Republicans. Elijah Hart, he's not a Republican that is out to score points off African Americans. What is something you reach across the aisle with him on and work on?
Definitely. I think last session was the best indicator of that. I mean, you saw with raising the age, Missouri kind of finally came in line with the other 45 states, stopping charging 17-year-olds children as adults. We went back in a special session for these drug court issues. I think criminal justice reform is something that Republicans have an appetite for, and they see how these issues are affecting their communities as well as ours. So, I'm very confident that we'll be able to get some of these bills across the finish line.
I think there's a way you can approach things where you can impact policy, right? It may not even be bills you vote for ultimately, but it is things that were coming down the pike. They were going to look one way, but if you have the right leadership and the right people that will make that effort, you can impact them, and they look totally different, even if they don't earn your support, right?
Absolutely.
It's that parlor room thing that I think matters, and I think people overlook sometimes. Let's talk about this election. So, bad election for Democrats in Missouri. When you look forward, though, if somebody's talking about running for statewide office in 2020, and you would be now a person they're going to talk to for sure, if it appears to me in Missouri, if a Democrat's going to win, you have to have not only the black vote, of course they're going to win African-American votes. How do you get them energized and show up?
Absolutely. I mean, you need candidates that are not only enthused but genuine. Someone, when they come and they speak, you can relate to. And you say, look, whatever it is, even if I don't agree with them on this one issue. And I think that's what you kind of found with Beto O'Rourke out of Texas. I mean, he was just such a genuine person, and I think a lot of his message was very progressive, especially for that region. But people, even though he lost, bought into him because they knew he was genuine.
So the House Democrats got together, elected Crystal Quade. People that watch this show will know who she is. I think she's really part of every party. The Democrats have had a hard time in the legislature, but boy, it seems like the freshman class last year, and especially in the House, had a ton of talent. And she is a no doubt star. I think she's respected on all sides of the aisle. Why did you think that you went with early in the sophomore term, Crystal Quade, to lead your caucus?
Well, the thing about Crystal Quade is she is remarkable in the way she's able to work across both sides of an issue in an aisle. Both sides of the aisle. I mean, she's a great leader, and I mean, I think she's going to do a great job as our floor leader.
It is an interesting thing. It's almost like a transformational type thing with your caucus, and maybe looking toward the future.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. So right now, we've got 7 leadership positions in the House Democratic Caucus, and 5 of them are members of the Black Caucus, which is historic for us. We've never had that much.
And maybe shows the changing in the Missouri Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
And maybe the National Party as well.
Right.
Well, Representative Stephen Roberts, chair of the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus. Hope you'll come back throughout session and share your views on the ways you are impacting some of these policies.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be honored to.
We'll be right back with our opinion maker. We're going to try to drag an opinion out of Barklage after this.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
At Ameren, Missouri, we know what light can do. It draws people together and chases monsters away. And if you shine it in the right direction, it will light the path for the next generation, showing them what their tomorrow could look like, and spotlighting the possibilities that lay in front of them. Investing in our community by lighting the way forward. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back. This week in Missouri Politics, final segment. I had to bring the panel back. Such a big election time. Mary Elizabeth Coleman, David Barklage, Jeff Smith, 2 segments. Hope you're doing the Iron Man thing for us this time. And Jeff Mazur. David Barklage with Josh Hawley going to the East Coast. Who's going to be the Attorney General?
Well, I get distracted. I keep looking at the Eric Greitens wardrobe over there, and I almost feel like I'm on stage with Eric Greitens. So what was the question again? No, the Attorney General, I think that the pick for Attorney General is going to maybe take a little longer than people think. I don't know. But I think that it is a very important pick. You're putting someone to run really a large law firm, and it's very complex. You need a team player. You need someone who is not going to divide, as we saw in 1992 when you had the Attorney General, the Treasurer, and the Secretary of State already together. So I think there's a lot of issues there. I don't know who it's going to be, and I think it may take a little longer to pick that, but there could be an announcement today for all I know.
Maybe there could be one by the time this airs on Sunday of the crew there. I mean, look, there's a bunch of articles written at the end about how bad the office is. I mean, I think that it's odd timing for liberal outlets to run stories attacking a U.S. Senate candidate, but maybe there's some truth to some of those things. It is an important job. Who do you think the governor picks? Well, first of all, I want to apologize to David Barklage. I didn't mean to make you so nostalgic for Eric Greitens, but my money would be on Eric Schmidt. You know, I think Eric Schmidt has done a fine job running the Office of Treasurer, but perhaps more importantly, as David noted, the governor is looking for a team player, and Eric this cycle, you know, he was in the mix a little bit for the U.S. Senate seat. You know, he was talked about, he went to Washington, D.C., but then he pretty quickly got out, got behind Hawley, campaigned pretty hard for him, was vocal for him on social media, and I think he may be rewarded with the Attorney General's office. You know these guys, who do you think?
The timing couldn't be better for Jeff Sessions just having lost his job.
There you go.
Open spot.
So you think he'll be our
no, I jest. My serious answer is there's a guy who works in politics in this state, was a lawyer for the Vatican. Ed Martin, I think, is your next Attorney General, state of Missouri.
Oh, man. You know, I almost wish he would be just for you, just because it would be such a wonderful thing. I wouldn't have to watch Seinfeld reruns. I'd just watch your Twitter feed.
How about Peter Kinder? He's a lawyer.
Peter Kinder would be outstanding. You've had Eric Schmidt's been all over Jefferson County campaigning with you. You got Eric Schmidt, Jay Ashcroft, somebody who's an attorney would be, I'm sure, considered Bill Corrigan from here in St. Louis. There's a long list of folks that I think you could make arguments for. Which one do you think?
So I think Bill Corrigan would be an interesting choice. He has certainly shown a lot of loyalty to the party, worked hard, raised a lot of money for people. And he's kind of not in the mix. I don't know. I hear that there's rumors about other seats maybe opening up, and if that happens, then maybe Eric doesn't want to toss his hat in the ring.
I think we should out your pick. Your pick is Scott Rosenblum.
Absolutely, no question.
We know that.
If you're a prosecutor, now as a person who, you know, might need Scott Rosenblum, I don't want to see him be AG, but if you're a prosecutor in the St. Louis area, I'm sure you'd love to see Scott Rosenblum get out of your hair.
Sure you would.
Let's talk about Cleveland, Missouri. Jeff Mazur. Sean Nicholson is someone who I think has pulled off an ingenious move. He's worked very hard. He's had to take some tough election cycles. This time he came up with this idea, and it's been argued both ways. I mean, hat tip to him, but what happens now?
Well, let's think about just what it took to get to where we are, right? These things, we see very skilled people try and run these ballot initiatives, cycle in and cycle out. Oftentimes, very well-financed campaigns never even make it to the ballot.
Hard to get a
bungle
yes.
something up. These guys went and they got 300,000+ petition signatures. They put this thing on the ballot. Then they went and did I think what is the harder part, of getting genuine bipartisan support from real. This wasn't fig leaf Republican support. This is, you know, the Jack Danforths of the world saying we support this. We think this is a good thing. This is something that ought to happen for the state. Jack
Danforth is your messenger on ethics. I mean, if it was sanctimonious Missouri, you'd been 2 steps ahead.
I think now what you're going to see is people hopefully will respond to the fact that voters overwhelmingly said these are things that they want to see, and then this will be enforced in the law as it should be.
Mary Elizabeth Coleman, are you going to be representing West Butler County when this is over?
I'm fortunate to have just run in a 50-50 district. I hope they'll leave me well enough alone.
David Barklage, I guess this is going to be lawsuit time, right?
Is, and I think it was a failure of the legislature to enact reforms they should have. Shame on them. 2, the debacle.
Can I jump in and say the failure of the Senate, not as the new House member to defend the House,
She's already got
but
it down.
A lot of those ethics reforms had been passed in the House.
Yeah, except the problem is that leadership has to extend to both bodies. If you're going to get something done,
David Barnes, they pass an
one or
ethics
the
bill
other.
every week, all session. If they pass also conservative policies, the Post and the Star are going to call them unethical.
I get that. I'm just saying is they could have taken it off the table. The issue is I do think there are several constitutional issues that are problematic. It's even more problematic for the auditor has to implement it because you have 2 contrary theories. One is of creating all these partisan districts, and the other one is upholding the civil rights law protecting black representation.
You can't do both.
And I don't think you can do both. So that's going to be a problem for Galloway.
Jeff Mazur, you the new state demographer?
I'm not. But I do think they did a great job, as Jeff Mazur acknowledged, getting out early and defining it. I think, frankly, the opposition didn't think it would get on the ballot. And I think once it did get on the ballot, they thought, hey, we can beat this thing. We'll have enough money.
They thought they couldn't beat it once it got on the ballot. I think they were right.
Well,
I mean, it was a well put together situation to marry some of these ethics things that are sort of, window dressing with some real substantive reforms in how you draw maps. But look, you're somebody that I think understands this issue very uniquely. Can you draw maps where Democrats pick up seats and not dilute African-American representation in the House? It's what do you say, 5 of the 7 leadership spots are held by African-Americans now?
You know, I think you can, and I think what we saw in states like Florida and Georgia this year suggests that you can. You saw,
laughing.
you know, because you saw people willing to vote, white people willing to vote for African-American candidates in those races, in historic numbers for statewide candidates. And I think the, you know, white progressive.
Wesley Bell,
look at Wesley Bell. Look at Tashara Jones. Look at Mike Butler. You have the last several big races in St. Louis City and County. You see white progressives not just voting for.
It's an incredible risk to dilute those seats and for 10 years to have a map that you have cut a third or half of black representation.
I want to say, Scott, in 2011, I was an appointee to the commission that drew the maps, the Senate maps. I sat in a room, spent 8 hours sitting in a room with the president of the St. Louis NAACP. Sitting there going precinct by precinct, drawing maps so that we could get a Democratic map that drew a North County seat that could be won by an African-American candidate. And ultimately, we got that map done. We got that done. We went together with that as a Democratic map. As soon as it went to the judges, it took one sitting member of the Senate to go to one judge he knew to get that district changed and drawn so that a white candidate could follow him up in that seat in North County. That, I think, is the story of the way redistricting works now. And if you don't have a judge, if you don't have a friendship with one of these 6 appellate court judges that wind up drawing these seats, you've got no stake in the game. I think that's really bad for African Americans in this state.
Interesting. So Jane Cunningham can blame Mazur now. So the lawsuits, you think nothing comes of them?
I think lawsuits, I'd give at least 50-50.
You're an attorney. What comes of them?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I think it's hard to overturn the will of the people. I think it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. I think we're going to see a lot of delays, and ultimately, my bet is on it being implemented. I think that it's hard to say, we got it on the ballot, it was voted by a big margin of the people, everybody made their case.
You mean prediction, does it stand, a court challenge?
I think it stands partially.
Does it stand?
I think it stands.
I mean, look, it was overwhelming. Speaking of overwhelming, who overwhelmingly won the week this week, Jeff Mazur?
I'm going to say that the 600,000 working families who got a wage gain by virtue of the Prop B passage in the election, that's 600,000 working people, and 250,000 children in this state who rely on those 650,000 people to put food on the table and take care of them every day. That's a big win.
You've spent a lot of your career fighting for. It's great. Jeff Smith, who won the week?
I'm going to say Ben Singer won the week. He was the communications director for Clean Missouri. He helped shape that message.
Sure.
He was a former staffer of mine a long time ago, so I'm pretty proud of him. But he went toe-to-toe with people like Senator Jim Talent, some giants in the Republican Party, and won.
Great politics. Who won the week?
Casey Wheat, hands down, leading HRCC. I filed and I was told we're going to lose 7 to 10 seats. There's no way you get that seat back. It's awfully nice of you to file. And
I talked doom and gloom to her. She was always very positive, and she was right.
That's right.
Who won the week?
I'm going to also go to the legislative committees. I'll expand a little bit. Robert Nodell, who was there first, bringing Casey in, John Ratliff, and Kit Carancer in the Senate. I had predicted 2 to 4 seat loss in the Senate and a dozen or better in the House 6 months ago, and then dropped it down to 1 to 2 in the Senate and 3 in the House, and still wrong.
I'm going to go reverse on all of you. I'm going to say two men who could be Democrats, one maybe, one for sure. Joe Shepard stood by his wife through a long campaign, the husband of Claire McCaskill. Took a lot of hits. It's got to be tough to have that many hits, and he never responded. I'm sure that was for her. And Jay Nixon, I think the election in Nicole Galloway shows a lot of great judgment on his part. He tried to set the Democrats on a competitive path forward. We hope you'll be competitive this week, and you'll join us next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.